It's time to open up that weekly Peacock and Williamson mailbag. Russell Wilson being benched by the Denver Broncos, still in a playoff race there. And what about Lamar Jackson? Did nobody really want Lamar Jackson this offseason? Might be this year's MVP. All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate all the everydayers out there. Subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guarantee. As you can probably hear, voice a little raspy and a little under the weather here, getting some
playing injured today.
Here. Yeah, but we're fighting through it here. I'm battling.
You're playing a road game and you're playing injured. I mean, tough stuff here,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Too many rugrats with the family running around. There's bound to be some germs that people are catching here, and so I think I did catch one of those. Got a little cough going, so I'm gonna try to keep that
I'll carry
out of
the
it.
load today, dude. Don't worry.
I mean,
just set me up.
Come on. You know what? You've been carrying me all year. There's no reason to change that here on December 27th as we open up our Wednesday mailbag. But some breaking news here before we get started with some of the questions, and that is that the Denver Broncos are going to bench, it looks like, Russell Wilson, and Jarrett Stidham will be inserted as the starting quarterback. This from Ian Rappaport just before we started recording on this Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Sources, the Broncos are strongly considering having quarterback Russell Wilson sit for the final two games, preserving financial flexibility for the offseason. Wilson has $37 million in 2025 salary that vests as guaranteed, basically, if he's still on the roster in March of 2024, which is coming up in just a few months. And if he suffered a serious injury, it would complicate matters because then you would have injury settlements and you would there's some contracts have language that they're guaranteed for injury, but maybe because when you hear about guarantees, it's not always just 100% guaranteed. Sometimes it's guaranteed for injury. So it's looking like Russell Wilson might have that in his contract, which is to say the Denver Broncos are going to cut Russell Wilson and take a cap hit, but get out of that contract before March of 2024. So we have seen the end of Russell Wilson as a Denver Bronco.
Yeah, huge news. And I mean, basically, it's kind of a balancing act of when do we shut him down so he doesn't get hurt, so all the things you laid out, versus when are we still playoff eligible? I mean, if you're still in it, you can't put your best quarterback down. And I still think he is that. He had an okay season, not great, not worth the money, not his age. Peyton didn't handpick him. And speaking of handpicking, let's not forget, I mean, it was like the day or second day of free agency opening. They went out and aggressively added Jarrett Stidham. I mean, they obviously keyed on him. That's the guy I wanted in free agency. That's the guy I'm after. So we'll see. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be the answer next year, but they like him, obviously, and we just haven't seen a lot of them play for the Broncos yet.
And we will take a look at the playoff scenarios here coming up after week 16 now, going into week 17 and where those Denver Broncos are, not in as good of a spot as they were a couple weeks ago when they were really surging as well, which might be a big part of it because now there's, so many teams they'll have to leapfrog and compete with to get into those playoffs. So that's probably part of the scenario as well. It was like, well, we can't really bench Russell Wilson if he's going crazy and we're going to make the playoffs. But, now that we're sub 500, 7-8 sitting here going into week 17, it's the right move for the franchise. And you get a look, got to have a little look here at the other quarterback too. And, Jarrett Stidham is probably not going to prevent them from adding a quarterback in the draft or in the offseason. But is he your long-term backup? Does he look great? Does he look better than Russell Wilson did? So it'll give you some clues there. And and give you an opportunity to evaluate Jarrett Stidham. But, the big story here is that Russell Wilson's done with the Denver Broncos, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of market he has after he is cut by the Denver Broncos before March.
Yeah, I mean, it's mailbag day, and we're getting a lot of questions, and of course there's quarterback questions, but it looks as though there's going to be another guy on the market. Kind of reminds me of Derek Carr last year with the Raiders. They shut him down at the end of the year, knowing they weren't going to bring him back. Coincidentally, I think Jarrett Stidham took over. I mean,
He did?
I think that is how that went. I'll come to think of it. So there will be someone on the market that maybe Atlanta or, someone says he's better than what we got.
How about this one? Lamar Jackson. And, he's playing so well, has the Ravens with the best record in the NFL after 16 weeks. And so naturally there are some questions that come about. And one of those from Jared here on Twitter. And Jared says, how far ahead in the NFC South would the Atlanta Falcons be if they had given up 2 first-round picks for Lamar Jackson?
It's a bigger conversation than just that, but they would be far ahead. I mean, you wouldn't have Bijan, you wouldn't have next year's first, but so what? I love Bijan, but I think you'd be way better, obviously, with Lamar.
Especially this year with how much Bijan has been used. It's not like he's been used so much that, they would be giving up a ton with Algier and the way they ran the ball anyway last year and have run the ball even without Bijan this year, as good as Bijan is.
And to really nerd out, if they would have done that, they wouldn't have signed Heineke, and that money would have gone to something else. They probably would have had some other piece on the team, whatever, But I mean, we're not going to go the butterfly effect of all this.
Right.
So when that was going on, I was critical of the league, especially Atlanta, especially Washington, because Washington's first round pick was until like 17, where Atlanta's was at 8 or whatever. So it was less to give up. But I also think there's some revisionist history here. I've heard a lot of people saying, well, anyone could have had Lamar. No, they couldn't. Baltimore had to let him go. They had all the power in this. Their negotiations weren't going well, so they wanted the league to negotiate for him. And I heard a cap guy talking about this before, and he laid it out like that. But he also said what the league wasn't excited to do was give Lamar a Watson insane contract. Everyone would gladly pay him market value, but they weren't sure if they wanted to give him the insane contract because frankly, he had a hard time finishing the last couple of years. I know people forget these things, and we hadn't, the Todd Monken offense has helped him as a passer and all these things. He's having a great year. Not that he wasn't a great player before the season, but I think there was just too many hurdles for other teams to be like, I have to give this guy an insane contract, lose 2 firsts, waste all my time negotiating with other people while the Raiders or Ravens just match it. It kind of was a dog and pony show.
And Lamar has to want to go there because you're signing Lamar Jackson to a free agent contract. It's not like the Ravens were trying to trade him and you just have to trade for him, So the Ravens didn't want to let him go. There was a contract dispute there. Lamar, with not having an agent, a standard agent changes things with how many teams he's talking to, how easy it is to navigate all of those things. So a lot of teams can sit there and a lot of fans can sit there and say, "Man, we could have had Lamar Jackson." You probably couldn't have. Is there a scenario where he could have been on another team? I think it's possible, but I think it was just so very unlikely. And that's why we saw it play out like that. It's not like nobody wanted Lamar. I think it's more like it was going to be too difficult to get Lamar and everybody knew it. And maybe there were some teams that should have tried harder because maybe it was potentially possible. And maybe Lamar did want to go to a certain team and it would have been worth the 2 first-round picks. And maybe you could have structured that contract with Lamar in a way that the Baltimore Ravens would not have matched it. But that's all probably maybe not impossible, but very unlikely. So,
1% chance type of thing.
Exactly.
And it's such a busy time of year. You're trying to build your roster. You can't. That's the other thing is it would handcuff you to start negotiating him because he's such a huge piece of cap hit. Well, I need to sign a left tackle and a defensive end, and I can't do any of that stuff. And the league is flying by, and everyone's getting signed left and right. And we got to sit here and hope with a 1% chance this thing works out with the stud quarterback.
I don't remember what the date was that Lamar actually ended up signing with Baltimore. But if it was the time to do it would have been, okay, after, the first couple of waves of free agency are done. And I know it took a while with Lamar, but if there was an opportunity to do it, it would have been pre-draft. And when or even post-draft, but I think Lamar's contract was done before the draft, right?
I think so. I think it was done well into free agency because I remember like Baltimore didn't sign anyone for a while, and they couldn't. Their money was kind of frozen,
which is why the other teams would not have wanted to do that because that contract would have been held up. But once you did most of your work in free agency, then there would have been an opportunity. And so for some teams, maybe the Falcons, whoever it is, it probably would have looked good to at least your fan base to have tried to do that. Once your major lifting is done, it's before the draft, and you have that time period where you're probably not going to sign anybody anyway. You throw that out there and you sign them to a sheet, an offer sheet, and it looks good because you tried to do it, even if you knew that it was going to get matched.
Yeah. Last nugget on that is good.
I'm surprised nobody even tried to do that.
Yeah, I was kind of going to contradict that a little bit, and I don't know this for a fact. And we know he doesn't have an agent, and it's his mom, but they also have lawyers. It's not just mom just looking things up on the internet of how to write a contract, So my hunch is, and we know the Ravens Lamar conversations weren't going well. They didn't see this the same way. That's a fact. But I also think it probably worked to the Ravens' advantage of people. Your people can have conversations with whoever in the league, and I'm sure somebody called Mrs. Jackson or if you're nasty, or the lawyers or whatever, and offered some sort of deal. You're like, let's talk ballpark at least, and they said that's about what the Ravens are offering. Maybe we are crazy to ask what we're asking,
Mm-hmm. Next, what's going on with the Packers defense? Is that something that I know Matt's getting a lot of questions about that because certain statistics out there about how stark the difference is between their offense right now and what's going on with that Packers defense and playoff scenarios as well coming up next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Gametime. When you download the Gametime app, get $20 off with our promo code. More on that in a moment because Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. It shouldn't be a hassle to buy tickets. That's where Gametime comes in. You should be excited to buy tickets for your next big event. Gametime has killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You can see the view from your seat before you buy. All-in prices show your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal without those hidden fees. There are zone deals. You pick the section, and Gametime picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. So get tickets all the way up to the time that your event starts and even an hour after the event starts with Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So do you want to throw the stats out there on this Packers defense? And we do have a question here about the Green Bay Packers, and it was from JDS. He said, outside of playing those Packers in that defense, is there any positives for Bryce Young right now through the end of his rookie season?
I'll start with Young, but then there's a lot of Packers talk. Like, it's been a brutal year. I had a lot of doubts of him coming out of Alabama, but what I've seen from Young the last 2-3 weeks, I think is better. I mean, it's not leaps and bounds. I mean, he's not out of the woods, but I do think he and that team as a whole has been better. I mean, the defense is respectable at this point. The offense has been below average, not putrid, and that brings me to this because I've started this kind of new tradition the last 4, 5, 6 weeks or whatever, where I try to think like NFL teams think when they prepare for their opponent. And those teams really focus on the last 4 weeks. Like Steelers-Niners doesn't do much for the Niners' upcoming opponent, or Steelers going to Seattle. And I mentioned that because those are our teams, and that was week 1. Like the Seahawks aren't studying week 1 Niners-Steelers games as they prepare for Pittsburgh to show up this week. Everyone studies the last 4 games, and then maybe you go back and boy, they played a defense just like ours in week 9. Let's see how they attacked it. So the league changes so fast. There's so many injuries, things of that nature, that every Tuesday I've been posting a chart on Twitter at Williamson NFL. Go check it out. And I think it's very indicative of where the league is at this moment, at this second. And the chart is just EPA offense on the bottom, defense on the vertical axis. I'm by no means a mathematician. And I just throw it out there the last 4 weeks. I don't say, here's your team, you stink, blah, 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 blah. So some things of note on that chart. San Francisco's far and away the top offense. The Chargers, far and away the worst offense. The Jets are behind them. 2 of the top defenses nobody would think about. There are actually 3 of them. Are the Raiders, Bears, and Falcons. They've been playing really good defense over the last 4 weeks. Some of the worst defenses, the Eagles are down there. People wouldn't think about that. But by far, and I commend Packers fans because you guys are passionate, the Packers, unsolicited, got me 1,000 questions, 1,000 Joe Barry should get fired, 100 Jordan Love should be MVPs. Because when you look at this chart, the Packers are the second best offense behind the Niners over the last 4 weeks and dead last defensively. Surprisingly, Seattle's actually right next to them, and Seattle fans didn't seem to get their panties in a bunch about it. But Green Bay fans, it's kind of like the Matt Canada offensive coordinator trigger. They hate Joe Barry. I mean, to no end. And we always talk about this. They use a first-round pick every year on defense. And this chart is pretty alarming because they are very, very far right as a great offense and dead last in defense over the last 4 weeks.
And when you visualize it too, it's just,
it's hard.
It's clear, and it's been obvious, and it's been obvious for a long time, and LaFleur and management with the Green Bay Packers have not wanted to make a change, a defensive coordinator, but it's been pretty obvious and for a while. This isn't a new thing for those Packers. It seems to be getting worse, and Matt LaFleur even talked about having more of a hand in the defense over the course of the week in preparation for the last few games, and that hasn't helped either. And so there's a big problem with how much talent is on that Packers defense and the way they're playing right now, and they seem to be getting worse. And at some point, I don't know what you're doing if you're the Packers, if you're not trying to make that better. And it would seem that a new defensive coordinator is necessary, and it's near 100% certainty it's going to happen in the offseason, but it probably should have happened at some point during the season. And you cover a team that made a coordinator change. We saw how the Bills offense did get better, and it's looking like it was the right call to change offensive coordinators there. The Pittsburgh Steelers, and you can speak to that, what happened after they changed offensive coordinators when the fan bases had pitchforks out and wanted that change for a long time. We've seen the Packers not make that change, even though those fans have had the pitchforks out for a long time, and it would seem that maybe they should have made the change. And you cover a team that did make that change.
Mm-hmm.
Did it help? Was it necessary? Even if it doesn't help, do you have to make the change because you're trying?
Well, I mean, the Steelers and Packers have some similarities in terms of they kind of move like glaciers. They're an old school teams, obviously. Green Bay doesn't even have an owner, so that'll complicate some things too. Like, you got to run these things by ownership or not just firing a guy mid-season. The Steelers hadn't let go of a coordinator, I think, in like 50 years. I mean, like, they just don't ever do that in mid-season. They don't make mid-season coaching changes. So for Pittsburgh, the game after firing Canada was the first time they hit 400 yards in an eternity, and it was their best offensive game of the season, best offensive game in a couple years by a long shot. And then this past week, without Canada, was the next best. Or they beat Cincinnati handily, and the offense was very, very capable. But they also had a 3-game losing streak in there to the Cardinals, Patriots, and at home, and the Colts, which was like the three-game stretch that was as bad as any in Steeler history in terms of like point spreads and all those things. So is it all Matt Canada's fault? Of course not. Is it all Joe Barry's fault? I mean, I phrased that wrong.
Yes.
If you're to make a switch, I mean, it might all be his fault. It might all have been Canada's fault from the beginning. But when you make a switch mid-season, you can't just write a new offense. I mean, you still have to run the play. You have to still run. The playbook remains the same. You can't install a new offense. You can't be like, let's take the Wayback Machine to minicamp and put in the West Coast offense or Shanahan's offense. You still got to finish the season with the cards you're dealt.
Right. You can make a few different calls for what's already in the playbook. You can game plan a little differently and have different ideas there. You can install a couple of things, every week maybe, but you're not putting in an entire new offense.
Obviously, your play sequencing is different. The way you prepare during the week is different, and that has some ramifications, but you're still living with the same playbook, the same, offense, the same defense. I described this a lot, obviously, during the Canada stuff, is maybe you take a chapter of the playbook and you throw it in the fire. Like, I'm done with this nonsense. This hasn't worked.
Yeah, we got to stop running
right.
cover 3 because we don't do it well, and we're getting toasted
jet
on
sweeps
this.
for the Steelers or what? I mean, enough jet sweeps. We can throw those away or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, they were the example. The Steelers were the lowest team in the league in play action. Can we bump that up 3% at least? I mean, a little bit of those type of things you can tweak, but the route concepts and the verbiage are all the same until the offseason.
We've got a few more questions here. One I want to get to about some what ifs with this season, and how about Baker Mayfield and those Tampa Bay Buccaneers playoff scenarios as well next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. The easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. And it's just you against the numbers at PrizePicks. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and maybe some sharks in the pool as well, you pick more or less than so PrizePicks put the projections out there, and then you're just playing against those projections, more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and watch those winnings roll in. You could turn $10 into $250, up to 25 times your money this football season and basketball season and baseball season playing PrizePicks. And speaking of basketball season, right now there's combo projections as well, specifically designed for combining one football, one basketball, maybe a couple of football, a couple of basketball stat projections into one play. So, for example, LeBron James plus Travis Kelce, 10.5 combo of 3 points made plus receptions. Super fun, super easy at PrizePicks, and have a whole bunch of fun while you're doing it. And all you got to do is go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL or download the app and use our code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, Baker Mayfield. Is he going to get paid now? Has he put himself into, as Michael puts it, the Daniel Jones contract area? Could he get more than that? Or is Baker Mayfield maybe going to be in a situation where he plays on a different team and has a bidding war for his services? Or do the Tampa Bay Buccaneers sit there and say, well, hey, we found ourselves our guy. He's playing well here, so why would we change this? Let's give him that Daniel Jones contract.
Yeah, so I wanted to look at the Daniel Jones contract and Baker's contract. So I looked at that real quick. And right now, which isn't all that important because he's obviously outplaying this, he got $4 million this year plus 2.8 bonus. So a low deal. I mean, like,
it's backup money.
That's backup money. I mean, that's veteran backup money. That's less than Mitch Trubisky, I think. I mean, like, that's the kind of neighborhood he was keeping there. But they're probably going to win or probably going to win the division and go to the playoffs, and he's worth more than he's getting. I also think that hurts Tampa's ability to add a quarterback, but I think that they should strongly consider bringing Mayfield back and drafting someone. But I looked at the Daniel Jones contract, and I know there are some outs and whatnot, but it was 4 years, $160 million, $92 million guaranteed, which is a far cry from $4 million 1 year, 2.58 signing bonus. I don't think you have to offer Baker that deal to keep him. Like, would he do, I think it's like the Geno Smith deal. Would he do $32 million over 2 years guaranteed? Now you're talking,
Well, Baker Mayfield is putting together a better season than Daniel Jones did when he got that contract.
Agreed.
I would put
doesn't
Baker
make
Mayfield,
it right.
It's true.
Neither one of us were big on that. Yeah.
And yeah, we didn't like it at the time either. This isn't revisionist about the Daniel Jones stuff. And excuse me, Baker Mayfield is Baker Mayfield is a better player. Period. I think if we were drafting quarterbacks to play a season for our teams, we would pick Baker Mayfield before Daniel Jones, right?
Yes. I mean, he'd be closer to Geno, but
right.
Yeah.
And Geno's contract's not far off from where Daniel Jones' contract was either. So I think that's where Baker Mayfield put himself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking like 2 years, 40 million, something like that. You know,
And it'll be 2 years, 40, but there'll be more years, but there'll be like the
Mhm.
Jones, like the Geno Smith contract, there'll be a way out after 2 years because those are essentially 2-year contracts with more years at the end. And that's probably what it'll end up looking like for Baker Mayfield. So usually that's what happens in free agency too. You think, okay, it'll probably be this. So it's like, well, it's bloated. It looks like it's twice that big, but it actually is a 2-year deal that they can get out
Yeah.
of. And so that's probably where Baker Mayfield will get. So my answer is probably yes. He'll get that Geno Smith, Daniel Jones deal. And I think that's what he's earned this year.
The only thing I'll fight him on is Daniel Jones got 92 million guaranteed. Like Baker Mayfield's not getting 92 million guaranteed.
And to bring it full
40.
circle, I don't know what those is that 100% guaranteed? Is it guaranteed for injury? Much like the Russell Wilson thing. So, next March when they cut Daniel Jones, they're doing it because
Does he not get that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually
That
not
can be
guaranteed.
foggy.
It's only guaranteed for certain things. And it's only guaranteed on certain dates and those types of things. So I would have to look deeper into that Daniel Jones contract. But I have a feeling all that 92 is not 100% guaranteed.
I do know that there are some outs for the Giants. It's not as restrictive as you might think. The other thing I would say about Mayfield is I think incentives might be important too. Like if we go to the playoffs over the stint here, you get this big chunk or playing time. I mean, if they happen to draft some whiz kid and he goes down to 30% playing time, well, then he doesn't get his bonus,
Let's wrap this up with a couple more quick questions here. A good one from Joey Bag of Donuts, who always brings it every single week. He says, a couple what ifs. Would the Colts be doing this well with Anthony Richardson? And how about those Browns? Would they be doing this with Watson? Are they better off with Flacco than they were with Deshaun Watson playing quarterback?
I'm going to say yes on the Colts, assuming health. I mean, we know he didn't finish games, and assuming he played 80, 90% of the snaps. I'm not saying he has to be.
It's different. It would look different, but Gardner Minshew isn't playing so great that Anthony Richardson couldn't have, developed into playing this well. And I think Shane Steichen's a really good coach and would have figured things out with Anthony Richardson. And that would have been a lot of fun to see. And there's potential that they could be even playing better. Would it look like a CJ Stroud Texan situation? I don't know about that, but I would project it to not be worse necessarily than it is, even if it looked a little different.
My thoughts on the Colts are similar in that, the obvious argument with veteran versus rookie is, well, the rookie would make a lot more mistakes. Well, Minshew makes a lot of mistakes. I mean, like he's not exactly a close to the vest, boring type quarterback. So maybe it would be similar in the mistake world. I'm certain the big plays would be greater with Richardson. My hunch is he would be harder to play against for opposing defenses. And you got to remember, that's a very smart coaching staff that spent the whole offseason preparing for Richardson, not Minshew. So there's a lot of stuff they can't do that they wanted to. As for the Browns, I'm out on Watson. I mean, maybe this Flacco thing's a flash in the pan, but it's clearly the best quarterback play they've gotten from Watson or anyone this year. So I can't say it would be as good.
Yeah, the way I'd put it is it's hard to imagine that, at least statistically, and look, wins and losses too, that it'd be beher with Watson than what's going on with Flacco because he's playing so great. And, he's had a few interceptions here and there, but he's putting up 300 yards a game. And you'd be pretty happy with that from Watson. So, yeah, I don't think it would be any better with Watson.
So we opened the show with Russell Wilson's contract. We just talked quarterback contracts, talking Flacco. This is like the first conversation I want to have when the Browns are released is who's the starting quarterback next year? I mean, like you almost have to give Joe a contract, right? But you're so married to Watson. I mean, what if you win a playoff game with Flacco? I mean, like, that whole conversation's a whole podcast.
Oh yeah, we'll have that conversation for sure when the Browns are eliminated and they don't have as easy of an out as Daniel Jones, Geno Smith.
Oh no,
Wilson. They don't have that with Watson in that contract with the Browns.
He's a $63 million cap hit next year and the year after, and you gave up all these first round picks for him. Like you're married to the guy, and he's not your best player.
Last one here quickly of the in the hunt teams. This one from Devo on Twitter. Who do you least want to make the playoffs in each conference?
I don't want to see the Vikings. I don't want to see anybody extra in the NFC South. I do want to see the Rams. I do want to see Seattle. I'd be fine with Green Bay. I mean, the offense, oh, by the way, is the youngest in the league. I mean, and it's excelling, and the defense is a disaster. In the AFC, I'll exclude the Steelers for personal reasons, but I'm sure they're not high on anyone's list.
I'll answer that one. I don't want to see the Steelers.
I'm sure. Buffalo's an obvious one, and they're not guaranteed a spot, but I'm glad kind of Denver's out of it.
Buffalo back up to the 6th seed now this week after a winning streak, 9-6 record. They're going to be in, and they're going to be tough to deal with, and they have potential playing those Dolphins.
They can win it all.
The Dolphins have the Ravens this week, and then the Bills next week, so they could still win the division.
So who would, assuming the Browns go, assuming the Bills go, that leaves one spot. Nobody wants to see the Steelers. I'm not real psyched about the Colts. I'm not real psyched about anybody else in the South, whoever doesn't win it.
The Raiders are chippy. I don't want to see them in the playoffs. Don't want to see the Broncos.
They need like a million things to happen for them to even get into.
So I would love to see a healthy CJ Stroud. That would be my choice.
Okay, that's a good choice. Yeah, get back and playing well, and healthy Lawrence, healthy Stroud from the South. Somebody wins it, and that makes sense.
Yes, that would be the most fun for sure. All right, thanks everybody for all your questions. Apologies to those that we did not get to. We appreciate all the questions we get every week from all the everydayers out there. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Matt and I are back tomorrow. We're starting to make picks. We're already at week 17. Talk to you then right here. Peacock and Williamson.